Hey everybody, how's it going? It is the Fantasy Rugby Yanks. My name's Jared Dyke. Ben is not with us today. His schedule and mine got pretty flooded this past week, and had a small hiccup on top of it. So I'm flying solo. I don't plan on making this as a very long episode, but I do plan on giving you guys a little bit of something to hold you over for the week while we get our act together and get ourselves back into the saddle here. So don't forget, you can find us on Google Play, Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. And obviously Podbean, which is where we host this thing. Please leave us a review. Please, tell us your thoughts. We'll be happy to read it on the air. If you don't want it read on the air, you can also note that. Send us an email. We'd be happy to help you out on the email too. I'll give the email at the end, as I always do. Okay, so Six Nations. We are of course, this is one reason that I couldn't just go without any recording whatsoever. We have a huge weekend ahead of us in terms of Six Nations. No Premiership, which is weird, but no Premiership, no Champions Cup. It's Prem Rugby Cup final, which I care about because the Saracens are in it, but that's it. Other than that, it's always been the joke. No one gives a crap cup or something like that, because really nobody cares that much. That's just facts. Wish I could tell you that it was different, but it's not. Anyway, so let's talk about who's been scoring and who's been scoring big for Six Nations Fantasy, and who you're going to be looking out for this coming weekend, especially with so many injuries that have popped up over the last weekend. Blair Kinghorn is out for Scotland. Liam Williams, apparently his injury isn't as bad as they thought, but I don't trust that he'll be playing this week. I really, I don't have a lot of faith in it. So if you're like me, you're going to be seeking two new backs. I have some guys that can play in reserve. Like I still have Tommaso Allen on my bench, so I can always throw him into my centers and bump Stockdale out. So hopefully you have something similar where you can do that. There's a lot, and I still have a couple of healthy wings with him and Earls, obviously, and then let's look at replacement possibilities for those guys. And obviously there were a few other injuries. Maro Itoje is not going to be back; it's official. I knew it was going to be a bit of a rush job if he got back. They tried to rush him back for Italy, and then he re-aggravated his injury or had a setback or whatever. Either way, maybe not the wisest decision for the likes of Eddie Jones. So, your second row placements, we talked about it last week. Gilchrist, Cruz, Felix Lambie, Ibrahim Stain is second row eligible, so you can go with that. He's one of the top point scorers in this Rugby Mag variation here. You'll have to pardon my voice. I picked up a little something. It's not bad, but it's definitely affecting my voice. I sound a little scratchy, a little raspy. That's my voice. I apologize if that's nails on the chalkboard to your ears. Fullbacks. Actually, there's more fullback eligibles than you think. Like Henry Slade's fullback eligible, so if you don't have him on your team and you have an England selection you can pick up, he's probably a good idea. Jaden Hayward, sorry. I got Jason Woodward and Jaden Hayward crossed up. Jason Woodward, the fullback from Gloucester. Jaden Hayward from Italy is actually a decent play. He had one really bad week, but everything else was 20 plus, so that's pretty good. Elliot Daly he's had 2 good weeks, 2 okay weeks, and 2 weeks, so maybe not the most ideal. Honestly, Liam Williams wasn't that big of a play. He had 1 good week and then just completely bleh. So not really something I'm looking forward to having to roll out there. I don't think he's going to be healthy, so the point might be moot. Let's see, who else? Oh, wings, duh, because most wings are usually fullback eligible. Johnny May, that's probably somebody that's a good idea to put in your team at this point. He's scoring 35 on average, so pretty good. I think Scotland are going to have a hard time defending him. They let Josh Adams get loose. Speaking of the devil, Josh Adams isn't a terrible play, but so if you need to trade one Welshman for the other, that might be the one that you go for, because North is actually a little bit worse than he is. And although North scores more on average, so maybe not. I've actually played Keith Earls the last 2 weeks. He's got me 32 both weeks. So that's also something to consider. If you don't have Stockdale on your team, then what the heck you doing? He's eligible all over because he's eligible for a wing and fullback at least, if not. He's eligible for center, wing, and fullback. So get him in your team if he's not there. If he's not there already. We talked about Ian Henderson last week for the second rows. He hasn't done great, so maybe consider somebody else. I would probably lean even more towards one of the Scotland second rows of Gilchrist or Gray. They score at least 20 plus each week they've played. George Cruz scored a couple last week, so that kind of buoyed his score. So now he's up to 24, an average of 24. But he's not a bad option if you're looking for somebody that's just not going to lose you the week. Scrum halves, there's really only 2 or 3 that need to be mentioned: Dupont, Murray, and Youngs. I guess Laidlaw too, but he's okay. He's better on average than I thought he was. So those are your 4 scrum halves to consider. Tibaldi actually scores well when he plays. He scored 41 and 31 in the last 2 weeks, which are the only 2 weeks he's played in this championship. So also something to consider. And let's see, why not props? Props are, they're hit or miss in this competition lately. Alan Dell has been one of the more consistent scorers. Even Mako was Mako's still one of the top 5 scoring props, even though he's been out for the last 2 weeks because he did so well. So that tells you kind of the state of props in this competition, in this format. But Alan Dell is probably one of your more consistent guys. Sinclair's scoring 20 a game on the nose right now. That's good and bad. Bamba actually is a little bit higher than that. So those are probably your guys to look at. Kilcoyne's averaging 24, but he also scored 52 one week, and he hasn't scored above 20 outside of that. So his biggest week outside of that was 18. I've been playing Tyke Furlong. He's been better the last couple weeks. He's scoring 20 on the average. I might consider dropping Poirot for Alan Dell if I can get away with it. And then, of course, you have your hookers. So Jamie George is far and away the best hooker in this competition, and McNally's the second best. McNally's actually flanker eligible. Ben and I have talked about it a bunch. So if you haven't put that little trick up your sleeve yet, or pulled it out of your sleeve, however you want to phrase it, it's worth it. Last week was McNally's worst week, but outside of that, he was scoring 25 plus. So and that was a tough week. The Welsh really smothered him. I think they'll be fine. I think he'll be fine going forward. Girardo's not a bad play either, and actually Geraldini is a pretty good play. And of course, Rory Best. Don't discount him. He didn't play in round 3, so against Italy. So that's why his score isn't as high total, but his average is actually pretty good. So don't discount him. Ken Owens, not bad, but probably bottom of the bunch. Actually, no. In terms of average, Gildini's the bottom of the bunch, but I think Ken Owens has a pretty tough task in front of him with the way the Irish like to run their lineouts. So I think either of those plays, Best and Owens, might be a challenge. And the reason that we recommend McNally to flanker is because hookers just they have another way to score points, as opposed to a lot of other players. Like props don't have a lot of other ways to score points other than running the ball and tackles. If they get over the line, good. Those are the obvious ones. But hookers have that extra way to score where they can for lineout throws completed. So that's why that we recommend that you can slide a hooker to flanker, do it as long as he's a productive one, and McNally is a productive one, much like Harry Thacker from Bristol in the Premiership variation. And because I'm sure everybody is at least somewhat curious about who the top point scorers in this format is, well, some names have changed, some haven't. Connor Murray tops the list, as he did the other week. Johnny May, Alan Dell, Jamie George, Owen Farrell, Grant Gilchrist, Blair Kinghorn has now tumbled down because he basically didn't score anything in the match in which he got injured. Federico Ruzza from Italy and Dupont from France, and then Ebram Stain. So Ruzza is a flanker I actually didn't really mention a whole lot of. Now that I see this, he's scored well the last 2 weeks, 39 and 52. So if he keeps that hot streak up at home against the French, that could be a good sign. Maybe you pop him in there if you need a flanker real bad and you need somebody that's Italian. That's one of the on the Italian team because that's the only team you're willing to transfer a guy out from. Okay, so obviously the other game that Ben and I are playing, besides the Rugby Mag Premiership, which is not happening this week, so we won't talk a lot about it, is the Super Rugby Fancy Rugby Draft. I picked up my first win this week. Woo! Rico Ioane and the Crusaders front row combined for about 90-ish or almost 100 points. So I was very pleased with that return. Basically, I've been waiting for those are two on my roster that I've been waiting for to wake up. Ioane did so well that it rocketed him into the top 10 of point scorers. So but it's also very early. So big weeks like that will do that. So I want to talk about players that are giving up points or teams that are giving up a lot of points to certain positions. And I don't have the averages right now because obviously some of these teams are going to give up less because they've played less. But teams to maybe avoid would be like the Blues and the Bulls actually don't give up a ton. Especially the Bulls. The Bulls are very good. The only two teams they've given up fewer points total in terms of every fantasy player that's on the field is the Rebels and the Stormers, and they've played one less game than them. So that tells you maybe consider avoiding the Bulls every week. I've been doing my stop signs and my green lights. I think I've been good about the guys not to play, although I said no Saracens hookers last week, and I screwed that up, and Tom Wilson-Croft ended up getting 27. Whoops. Oh, well. But in terms of my green lights, I've been a little lackluster, to say the least. I think Palau got 12 last week for Super Rugby, and then the Premiership green lights I've been terrible with. So maybe listen to the stop signs more than the green lights. I'll still keep giving them every week that I can. For this week, it's going to be not nearly as pinpoint advice in terms of what players you should play and what players you can't, but I'll just do my best to give you some guidance in terms of when you look at your lineup here. I don't know, maybe I'll get the averages together and we can and I can have these posted on my Twitter feed. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that'll be a good place for you to maybe figure that one out. But yeah, so the Blues, the Bulls are definitely a team to maybe reconsider when you play a player against. I would also probably put the Reds on that list and the Lions on that list. Reds are kind of middle of the pack overall, but they are near the top of a lot of categories. Rebels are, despite even playing one less game, I still would reconsider when you have players playing against them because they have found ways to stifle a lot of position groups, second rows, outside backs specifically. Outside backs definitely, because those are supposed to be some of your biggest point scorers, and they are just stifling a lot of those guys. So reconsider that for sure. In terms of what your return is on some of these positions, I've been trying to figure out, because, of course, Ben and I are from America. We play American fantasy football, and some of you probably do too. And so we've been trying to liken some of these positions to certain ones in the NFL, in NFL fantasy. And I'd say that your fly halves are probably, I mean, they are often considered the quarterbacks of the field, but really they are kind of the quarterbacks. There's only one on each team that you really want to lean on, and they score quite a bit of points. The top point scorers for the whole competition are fly halves, midfielders, and outside backs. So those are kind of your big point scorers. So those are probably your quarterbacks, your running backs, and your wide receivers there. And then after that, it's front rows are hit and miss. So that's kind of like the tight end. Halfbacks and second rows don't score. They can score a lot, but they don't necessarily. So second rows are getting a little bit. So they're kind of like the kickers. And then the halfbacks have the potential to get a boatload, but they also have a potential to get or even negative. All these players have potential to get negative. So those are kind of like your defense. Be very careful about which one you pick. If your team's not getting a lot, if the team's not going to have a lot of possession in the game they're about to play, your halfbacks are going to do poorly because they're just not going to have a lot of opportunity to do a lot, and they don't necessarily make a ton of tackles or anything of that nature. I'm not saying that they can't, but I'm just saying they just don't end up. It's just how the defenses usually play out in rugby. And then you have your loose forwards. So again, that's it's a comparative position to like running backs and wide receivers. They score decent amount of points on weeks. They all have the potential to score big weeks, like Shannon Frizzell in round 2 scoring 32, almost 33 even. If you look at the week before for Shannon Frizzell, he scores 12. So, and that's not bad. I consider 12 a decent week. I consider anything other 11 or under okay, and then when you start getting down into the mid to lower single digits, that's when you go, ugh, awful week. And then you have a guy like Marnus Skuman who scores. He had one really, really bad week. He had minus 1.6 in round 2, and then the other weeks he's had 15 plus. He had 26 in the opening round because he scored a hat trick. So loose forwards are definitely loose cannons or wild cards or whatever you want to call them. They're definitely hit and miss. Pete Samu is still one of the top scoring loose forwards, but that's only because of his first week where he scored 33.9. Everything else he scored 7-ish or less. So again, they're hit and miss. They're all over. You're looking for consistency and you're looking for a decent average. Lamape seems to be catching fire as he scored 48 and 31 in the last 2 rounds for midfielders. You're looking for consistency in all of these. Obviously, everybody's going to have a down week, but then like Roscoe Speckman is clearly the real deal. He scored 3 weeks of 25 plus. The other week he scored 9. Besides that, so even like Gerhard Vanderheever, he's had 2 really good weeks and then 2 weeks. So you're just looking for consistency across the whole thing. But that's kind of what you're looking at. Let's see. Let me look at positions. So going down by positions as terms to the players, you probably want to look for maybe, you're probably like, and obviously you're not going to sit them every week. So for fly halves, your top 3 are Pollard, Yanchis, and Hayden Parker actually. So despite him having a really bad week, he's still up there. Lealiafano had a decent, he had a pretty good week 1 and a decent week 2. He's been really down. So keep an eye on that. Quade Cooper, I said it when Ben and I were drafting, sneaky good pick, and he's been a really good pick. He's scoring no less than 16 in his first 3 games so far. So give him that. Bowden Barrett, now that he's come back, is obviously a good one. Some other guys that you probably haven't gotten your hands on or haven't really noticed, maybe he's loose, like Josh Ioane. Maybe he's in there. Harry Plummer might be somebody that starts getting a little bit more run after his game against the Sunwolves for the Blues, where he started and Atari Black came off the bench. It looks like Hegarty might be playing 10 for the Reds for a while. He's listed as an outside back, so that could be a good thing. It could, give him more opportunity to cause damage. He's already a good kicker, so You get points for that on top of it. Yeah, those are the names. So that's the guys to keep an eye on for that one. And then front rows. So, probably an underrated front row, or at least a front row that was very underrated to start, was probably the Jaguars. And they've scored 13 in 3 or 4 weeks, so they're pretty good. Crusaders didn't do amazing, especially in the first week where they got minus 6.5, but last week they stepped it up and got me a big old 59. So if somebody was silly enough to ditch the Crusaders after their week, and I won't lie, I almost did. If they were silly enough to ditch the Crusaders after their first 3 weeks because they kind of had a start, hopefully you went and got them, or you have them on your list of front rows to add. Let's see what we got here. And yeah, Hurricanes front row did well the last 2 weeks, so maybe somebody got frustrated with them after their first 2 weeks and ditched them. Maybe the Rebels had a bad week last week, but maybe you can pry them away from somebody because they are somebody that they're still a decent front row. I think, again, another front row that's underrated. Scored 10 and 11 in the first 2 weeks that they played, so I think last week will be an anomaly, but you never know if you can find a panicked owner that says, I got to get rid of these guys. Maybe to wait for them to drop them, or you can see if you can get a cheap trade. Halfbacks. Jamie Booth is actually somebody that I really want to talk about because he looked really good in the last game, and even though the points didn't say it in the first game that he played this year, he scored 0.4, but he looked to be the livelier of the two halfbacks. So keep an eye on him. If you need at least a second halfback, or if you're really desperate for a halfback because you just haven't seen the results from some of your guys, consider snapping him up from free agency here. Nick Groom is probably going to be relegated to the bench. Ross Conier is back. You can't expect a lot from some of these halfbacks, though. It has to be said. It's everybody. Each one of them's got a good week, and then they're all for the exception of Aaron Smith, who's got 9.9, 9.9, 9.9, and 4.1 in his games. So we'll see what that turns into. I'm not too excited about that anyway. So Nick Phipps is obviously out, but he should be back soon. So consider keeping him on your radar. If somebody hasn't picked him up and stashed him already, maybe you can if you can afford the bench spot. And then there was one more that I wanted to consider. Maybe not. Maybe that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Kubeli's not bad, but he's not great. Yeah, halfbacks are real hit and miss. So if you can find one that's scoring you close to 10 most weeks, probably stick with him. Don't get too frustrated by the guy when you see one guy score 17, because there's a good chance that he's also scored like 2 in most weeks. Loose forwards have, like I said, they have a load of potential. Shannon Frizzell obviously bags of potential, 12, 32, and 17. Marnus Skuman has done very well over his weeks. Daniel Dupree has done very well for the Sharks. 11, 5.1, which isn't great, but 16.1 and 18 in his 4 games so far. So that's a guy to consider. Dwayne Vermeulen is a beast. He's got 10 plus points in 3 of his 4 weeks. And Quagga Smith, if somebody doesn't have Quagga Smith, then what the heck are you doing? He should be an automatic start most weeks. As long as he's in the lineup, do not bench him. He will perform for you. Let's look at some guys that maybe people don't necessarily consider that heavily, or consider heavily and have realized maybe they're just a name. Matt Todd is one that I would probably go, we'll see how he actually turns out as a fantasy asset. I was a little worried about Sia Khaleesi, but he turned in a good week before the bye, so maybe not as much. Yeah, David Pocock's probably just a name. We'll find out. I'm going to give it one more week. He was having a good week until he got a card the other week against the Hurricanes, so we'll see what happens. And then they played the Rebels, and Rebels have been stifling a lot of guys for fantasy scores. Jack Dempsey. Before the bye, he had 8.4 and 21.8. Obviously, the 21.8 was round 2 against the Sunwolves, so that's going to balloon the score. But I still think he's a solid option, especially if you have guys that you're waiting on to come back. Like Kieran Reed is out, obviously. Trying to think of the others, but there's a few others out there I'm sure that people are waiting on. So keep that in mind as a possible play for that. And and just be on the lookout for fill-ins on weeks that a team is playing somebody that's not good against the loose forwards. I'll put the rankings according to my calculations on average of what teams give up to each position on the Twitter. That way you guys can that way people can see that and have that information. We're trying to give advice, so we might as well give you as much information as we have. Midfielders, let's see. Lamape's obviously caught fire with 13, 48, and 31 in the last few weeks. Samu Kerevi is obviously a very good player. If you haven't been playing him, what are you doing? Kurtley Beale plays fullback now a little bit, looks like. Maybe. We'll see. He did well there. He did all right there last week, although he made a couple of errors. I think Sonny Bill Williams is kind of just a name. His 2 biggest weeks so far are 13 and 8. Yeah. Not that's a big old meh on that one. Yeah, Ma'ananu I ditched, so feel free to do the same as such. And there's one more. Ryan Crotty, another name that just be careful. I think he's just a name. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, but in terms of fantasy, doesn't always lay out that way. Lionel Mapu, same thing. Good players, not really doing a lot in terms of getting you points, so be considerate of that. And only played one game last week, but Richard Buckman is a midfielder, listed as a midfielder for the Highlanders, and it looks like they might be playing him on the wing, so we'll see if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You got 13 last week, which is still a decent score, so keep an eye on that one. And then your outside backs. Let's see what we got. Obviously, we talked about Vandy Heaver and such. Chase Tiatia, we talked about him last week. He did pretty well the last couple of weeks. He's only played 2 games, but 11.7 and 9.6. I'd keep an eye on him. He's probably going to play quite often for the Hurricanes because they're going to often be rotating guys like Asso and Proctor and Lamape and Jordy Barrett. So there's going to be a lot of movement in that back line in terms of guys getting subbed in and out. I would consider snapping up Chase Tiatia while he might still be available. Maybe not. We'll see. I don't think he's available in my league, but if he's available in your league, I'd consider snapping him up. Vince Asso I have, and he's basically been a big disappointment. He had 1 week of 9.3, and everything else has been 4 or below. So 3.5 or even. Jeez him. So again, another name, maybe not as good. Any of these back 3 or midfielders that kick as well. Remember, it's not like the Premiership Mag or the Rugby Mag, in the Premiership and the Six Nations formats that Ben and I have been playing. You don't need to designate a kicker. You can just have a guy out there, and he'll kick. I think he gets points off if he misses, so make sure it's a guy that accurately kicks. But guys like Hegarty, who can play fullback, or he's listed as an outside back, so he'll get points. SP Moraes from the Stormers, he's a goal kicker. He's got a hell of a boot, and he'll you can bet that he's going to be nailing those goals as well. So, and then trying to think. Oh, and the likes of like Jordy Barrett, who is the Hurricanes' long goal kicker / goal kicker if Bowden Barrett's off the field. So also might be worth having a look at that. You're probably playing Jordy Barrett either way, but just other things to consider. And then finally, second rows. Second rows really don't score a lot on average. They really don't. I don't know if any second row has a week above. Okay, we have, yep. We have 1 week. Yeah, second rows don't score a ton. We have 1 or 2 weeks of 10 or above. That's it. So, temper your expectations with second rows. The highest scoring one at the moment is Scott Barrett, but that's only 35. He scored 10 last week, and that's the most he scored so far. A couple other guys have scored 10 or above, but they don't score. You don't expect them to be lighting the world on fire. So, if you're sitting there and you're down and you have 1 game to go, you're waiting on the games in South Africa to kick off, or you're waiting on the game in Buenos Aires to kick off, and you're desperately hoping that your second row can rescue your day, you might want to just pack it in, because second rows aren't scoring a ton by any means. Really, they're almost like the kickers. I think if I didn't compare them to the kickers, then they kind of are, though. It's almost just a plug and play. It's almost just like, do I have a second row that's playing? Yes. Okay, cool. Throw them out there. As long as they're not getting negative points, consider it probably an okay option, and you don't need to drop them. I had Sam Whitelock on my bench as a backup second row, and there's enough second rows out there that I think can turn in points that I dropped him, and I think I ended up dropping him for Tom English. So I want a piece of that. Like I said last week, I want a piece of that Rebels back line, and Tom English was the only one that I could grab up, but I'll take it. So, yeah, consider you probably don't need to carry 2 second rows on your roster. So reconsider that if you are. Hopefully that'll be a help for you to, help build your team a little bit better. All right. So we are planning on potting this week. It's a big week, obviously, for Six Nations, like we talked about. Super Rugby is going to be something that we can focus on this week. So if you're a big Super Rugby fan, maybe this is the week for you to really tune into the pod. And we really look forward to it. We might have James back, so I think for the end of the Six Nations, that probably is very appropriate. So we'll look at that. I think we're going to be podding this weekend. I don't think we're going to be able to pod this week. We'll see. I'm working out the schedule with Ben and myself, so we got to figure out when we can, when we can't, all that good stuff. It may become a weekend pod, and then we put it out by Monday, Tuesday morning. So I appreciate everybody for sticking with us and being patient, and putting up with Ben and I's shenanigans. This is fun for us, and we hope you guys are enjoying listening to us. And like I said, please leave us feedback. Leave us feedback on all the sites where you can download stuff: Google Play, iTunes, Spotify. And feel free, please email the show, fantasyrugbypodcast@gmail.com. Comments, concerns. Hey, maybe you have a question and you think we can actually help. We'll be happy to help. So please, just if nothing else, keep downloading. Tell your friends to download. And we hope that you guys are enjoying this. And we will catch you next week. Enjoy the rugby. And if you're a fan of one of the teams that's in the running for the Six Nations, good luck. Godspeed. Cheers.